Friends, I'm happy to announce that Straight Talk has partnered with Blue Line Roasting Company to bring you delicious coffee to enjoy while you listen to this podcast. Blue Line Roasting Company also serves our first responders by giving a portion of all net proceeds to numerous organizations who support them. Order today at bluelineroasting.com. That's bluelineroasting.com. And don't forget, when you join the Straight Shooter VIP Club, you'll receive a free coffee sample and a mug, plus invitations to private podcast events. Because it's time to declare our independence from this corrupt, capricious, arbitrary, overbearing federal government. The states should look at Washington, D.C. and say, get out of here. You're not legit. Greetings and welcome to the Straight Talk Podcast. I'm your host, America's Sheriff David Clarke. I'm going to begin this segment with a question. Why does the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, the Congress, why do they have an ethics committee? Each of them has their own ethics committee. Now, you would think the reason why they have an ethics committee and why they need one is to monitor the conduct of their members. But what you have is the fox guarding the henhouse. Because when an ethics complaint is made, it's heard by fellow members of the Congress. And so I'll go back to asking why. Let's stick with the House of Representatives for now. Why does the House of Representatives have an ethics committee? You know, complaints are made of misconduct or misbehaving by members of the House of Representatives, and it's investigated by a committee. They actually have a committee. So I come across a story the other day, and you may recall this, where Congressman Eric Swalwell, Democrat of California, was alleged to have ties to a Chinese spy. In fact, he's alleged to have carried on a sexual relationship with a Chinese spy. And so an ethics violation complaint was made against him. And the findings are in. Let me read you some of this as I continue to comment on it. This should not shock anybody anymore. How corrupt and slimy and sleazy Washington, D.C. is. And how our institutions of government, mainly we're talking about the Congress here, but the presidency as well, engaged in flat out corruption and misbehavior. Some of it illegal. Remember when Nancy Pelosi was accused of insider trading? But then they said, it's not against the rules for members of Congress to get tips on stocks and whatnot, and then go ahead and make moves on their own using that stuff. Highly inappropriate. Just the thought of it. There's a conflict of interest there. They get information through a committee hearing, let's say from the banking industry, and then they run out and then they either buy stock or sell stock that they own based on that information before the public gets it. But let's go back here to Swalwell. He sat at the time on the House Intelligence Committee. Folks, that is one of the most sensitive, confidential committees in the Congress. Both the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee. You have to be extremely trustful because you're getting briefings, closed door briefings on sensitive information going on from the intelligence agencies, including the FBI, the CIA, national security, and they're expected to be trusted. But Swalwell, who sat on the committee, was alleged to be having sex with a Chinese spy. And at the time, because Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House, she refused to move him from the House Intelligence Committee. Folks, Swalwell had been compromised. And she had no problem with it. These people are so damn sleazy that none of this stuff surprises me anymore. It's just further evidence of my belief and how corrupt our federal government is. Let me read you from this story in Axios, because as I indicated, the House Ethics Committee finished their investigation. But wait till you hear the disposition. So this from an Axios article. It says the House Ethics Committee has concluded its 2-year investigation into Representative Eric Swalwell, Democratic California, over alleged ties to a Chinese spy. 2-year investigation. First of all, what took so damn long? And of course, we'll never find out, because all this stuff is kept from the American public, the American people. A 2-year investigation. Why do all these investigations? The Mueller Commission took 2 years. The Durham Commission took 2 years. Actually, he's almost took 4. What takes so long? I'm a former investigator with the Milwaukee Police Department. I worked homicide investigations that didn't take 2 years. Going back to the story here, it says the committee will not take any further action in the investigation concerning allegations that Swalwell may have violated House rules, laws, or other standards of conduct in connection with your interactions with Ms. Christine Fang. So they send this to Swalwell, and they let him know we're not going to take any further action. So, of course, Swalwell makes this public right away. He's waving it around. He's proud. He says, hey, look, man, they tried to smear me. They lied, and none of it was true. Yes, it is true. Yes, it's true. So it says here, Axios reported in December of 2020 that Fang, a suspected Chinese intelligence operative, had targeted Swalwell and other politicians who had potential to gain national prominence. Fang had taken part in fundraising activity for Swalwell's 2014 re-election campaign. Swalwell immediately cut ties with Fang in 2015 after receiving a briefing from federal investigators. He was not accused of wrongdoing. So he got a briefing and he cuts ties. Well, he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. What did he cut ties for? So it says House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California. You know, there's all these California people. McCarthy, Nancy Pelosi, Swalwell, Adam Schiff, all in California, for heaven's sakes. So Kevin McCarthy cited Swalwell's alleged tie to Fang as justification for removing him from the House Intelligence Committee when Republicans gained control of the chamber this year. So McCarthy comes in and he knows, he goes, this stinks. This is a conflict of interest. It's bad PR. He's been compromised. He removed him, but Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker, saw no need to remove this guy. How can both of those things be true? Back to the story here. Swalwell noted that despite his cooperation and the fact that he was never accused of wrongdoing, an unnamed House Republican filed a complaint against him. This was the original complaint. Excuse me. Here's a quote here. It's actually a Swalwell tweet. For years, MAGA GOP, there's that word again, has falsely smeared me into silence. And they did it to silence me. Swalwell tweeted, lauding the committee's decision to close the investigation without finding any wrongdoing. So we look at this, and I ask the question, why does the House have an ethics committee? Who's keeping an eye on these people? You know, we elect these people, we send them to Washington, D.C. They're rarely in their home state. They're out in the federal district. And we don't know what the hell they're doing. We have no idea what they're up to or what they're doing. And I guess we're relying on what? Them to watch themselves? You really trust that? Self-monitoring from these crooks? Self-monitoring and then having each other, the fox guarding the hen house? Because most of those people who sit on that committee know if one day this might be me, or someone makes an ethics complaint about me, and I don't want this ethics committee to do anything about it. This is incredible. And of course, they ended the investigation. They don't tell the American people what they found, who they talked to. Was she in fact a spy? Was Swalwell having sexual relations with her? We don't get to find out any of that. So he gets to come out now and say, oh, they smeared me. The MAGA people, they're trying to demonize that word. Embrace it, folks. I do. I'm a MAGA conservative, proud MAGA conservative. And I'm not going to let the damn Democrats try to demonize that word like they did the Tea Party. Yes, I'm MAGA through and through. But back to Swalwell here. So we don't know what the heck these people are doing. We don't know what kind of behavior they're engaged in. Somebody makes an ethics complaint. We don't get to find out what'd you guys do? What'd you find out? They just ended the investigation with a finding of no wrongdoing. Well, what did he do right? And I still want to know, was Fang a Chinese spy? And if the answer is yes, she is holding a fundraiser for Swalwell's re-election campaign, 2014. If she's a Chinese spy and she's holding a fundraiser for Swalwell, she compromised him. He's compromised. But nobody in Washington, D.C. seems to care. This one kind of flew under the radar screen. Now I want to talk about, let's just turn the page here onto something else. There's some good news. Let's go to that. Let's go to some good news here. Here's a story. Breitbart. I really enjoyed this one when I heard about it, folks. Title is 2022 Tax Records Show Black Lives Matter in the Red. Black Lives Matter had an $8.5 million deficit in its investment accounts, lost nearly $10 million in value, according to 2022 tax records. The nonprofit has blown through 2/3 of $90 million raised since the summer of 2020, following the death of George Floyd. It says here, the Form 990, the tax form, paints a grim picture of BLM's Global Network Fund financial health, indicating a trajectory toward financial insolvency. Hip, hip, hooray. In 2022, the charity logged a $961,000 loss on a security sale of $172,000. Co-founder Patrice Cullors resigned from the organization in May of 2021 due to allegations she was spending foundation funds for her own personal use. Breitbart reported last year that she hosted personal parties at a $6 million property in Los Angeles owned by the organization. Why are they owning a $6 million organization? Black Lives Matter. She admitted, we're talking about Patrice Cullors here, Coolers. She admitted the organization was ill-prepared to handle the large wave of funds, but denied any wrongdoing. Well, of course she's going to deny wrongdoing. So did Swalwell. Just deny. If you're a liberal or you're a Democrat, all you have to do is deny it. And nobody touches you. So even after her resignation in 2022, a tax return revealed her friends and family were still reaping heavy financial benefits to the organization. First of all, for all this money that was squandered, I don't really give a damn, because if you are stupid enough to donate to Black Lives Matter, you need your money taken from you and fraudulently used. You deserve it. But I'm getting to a bigger point here. So her brother, Paul Cullors, collected a salary of $126,000 as head of the security, despite not having a background as a bodyguard. So he's a bodyguard, her brother. First of all, there's a conflict of interest right there. Putting your brother on the staff, on the paid staff, drawing $126,000 a year salary for security, and he has no background in security. So it says here he was one of only 2 paid employees in the organization. Cullors and his 2 companies made $1.6 million providing professional security services to Black Lives Matter. So $1.6 million was taken out of these funds for him to provide security, but we don't know what kind of security that he's providing. So last September, Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation's board member, Shemaiah Bowers, was accused of siphoning $10 million from donors to pay his consulting firms. Last year, Black Lives Matter paid $1.7 million to his company, Bowers Consulting. Black Lives Matter former sister organization, Black Lives Matter Grassroots, filed a lawsuit accusing Bowser for using the charity's funds as his own personal piggy bank. This is a racket, ladies and gentlemen. And yet you cannot get the Department of Justice, and I'm not going to blame a Democrat administration. I'm not going to blame the Obama administration nor the Biden organization for this, because when Trump was the president, he didn't do anything to sick the IRS and the Justice Department on Black Lives Matter, this global network either, global funding network. This should have been a red flag. They all look the other way. Why? They're afraid. First of all, the Democrats, they're not afraid. This is one of their constituencies. But for Republicans, they're afraid. Well, we don't want to be accused of being racist. By looking at these shady dealings, these people collecting, people go to prison for this, ladies and gentlemen. Scam packs and whatnot, they go to prison for raising money and then using it for as their own personal piggy bank. People have gone to prison. So it says here, the story ends by saying this. Last summer, Black Lives Matter brought on a new board of directors led by Cicely Gay. Since 2006, since Cicely Gay has reportedly filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 3 times, according to the New York Post. So they bring her on the new board of directors, someone who's declared bankruptcy 3 times since 2006. This whole thing reeks of corruption, of graft. I can't wait for this thing to go belly up. This whole Black Lives Matter, the movement, this global network fund, the whole damn thing. And one of the things that all these people running for president on the Republican primary, on the Republican ticket, all of them should be asked. All of them. Hey, you know this Black Lives Matter Global Network Fund or Foundation? Yeah, it's these people have been pilfering money. Should you become president, would you direct your Justice Department and the IRS to go back and look at this? And if there's any corruption found, that we'll see criminal indictments, they should be asked. These are questions these people never get asked. There'll be a great debate question. Oh, the Republican candidates, well, you know what the Democrats are going to say. Well, it's all allegations. It's not true. We looked and we couldn't find anything. So in a related matter, Biden this week signs a police order on the second anniversary of George Floyd's death. This is a story from Reuters. U.S. President Joe Biden sought to reform federal and local policing with a broad executive order on Wednesday, the second anniversary death of George Floyd, while goading a seemingly immovable Congress to act on police and gun reform. The order directs all federal agencies to revise their use of force policies, creates a national registry of officers fired for misconduct, and will use grants to encourage state and local police to restrict the use of chokeholds and neck restraints. First of all, when Biden issues an executive order like this, it only applies to federal agencies. It cannot order the states. He cannot order state agencies to do this. So what they do, the trick they use, is they tie federal funding for this. Oh, hey, if you do this, we'll send you millions of dollars. And like the greedy folks that they are at the local level, oh, they hear free federal money, they're all over it. Oh, yeah, we'll do. What do we have to do? Where do we sign? Oh, that's all we got to do? Yeah, we can do that. How many millions of dollars are we going to get? They're whores for federal dollars. Mayors, county executives, governors, police chiefs, sheriffs. They're all whores for federal dollars, trying to patchwork their budgets together because of shortfalls and a lack of money at the local level through the property tax. They got to whore for dollars with the federal government. So Biden goes on to say, here's a quote, "It's a measure of what we can do together to heal the very soul of this nation, to address the profound fear, trauma, exhaustion, particularly Black Americans have experienced for generations," Biden said. Stop the presses. First of all, no bill moving through Congress should have the name George Floyd attached to it. This whole incident has been more divisive than any in probably the last at least a quarter century, maybe longer. And Biden says, together we can heal the very soul of this nation. This whole incident was a lightning rod, tore the country apart, caused rioting. People died. The war on police started. Actually, it started back in Mike Brown in 2014, but nevertheless. And let me say this about the second anniversary of the death of George Floyd. George Floyd is a convicted felon. Well, he was. Who, in one incident, he had a lengthy arrest record. He's a druggie. In one incident, he held a loaded gun to the stomach of a pregnant woman, threatening to shoot her if she didn't tell him where the money is. This was a home invasion burglar. George Floyd. I think he did like 8 years in a Texas state prison. And that's why I said, there's nothing to celebrate about George Floyd. Nothing. The sooner we put George Floyd in our rearview mirrors, collective rearview mirrors, the better this country will be.
Follow Bulldog TV on Facebook to join the fight against communism in America. A growing community of patriots are joining together to take back the media. Bulldog TV, Americans fighting for America.
You talk about race, crime, and politics. Some folks lose sleep over this, but not me, because I sleep just fine on my Giza Dream Sheets and pillow from My Pillow, especially this new 2.0. If you haven't gotten yours yet, you are missing out. Just go to mypillow.com and use promo code Clarke, that's CLARKE, and save up to 66% off. The direct link is also available on my website, americasheriff.com. Get a great night's sleep so we can continue the fight. So it's kind of interesting. Biden signed another order. He's on a roll here. And the order prohibited federal law enforcement agencies, so that'd be the ATF, the DEA, the FBI, from using race as a marker in any criminal investigation for the suspect. For a suspect. You can't refer to his race in your investigation. This is incredible. If you were paying attention to what I was reading about what Biden said, that you can't use race, he's calling this a protected class. Criminals, suspects. That you can't use race. You can't say, we're looking for a black male, 6'7", whatever, 200 pounds, wearing a red shirt and blue jeans. You can't use race as a marker. And your descriptions, and your investigations, in other words, you put together a suspect profile. Let's say you got a string of armed robberies and you want to put out a composite of the suspect. You think these things are related and you think it's the same suspect. So you want the public's help, right? So you say, you know what? We've had a string of 8 armed robberies of convenience stores, and we think it's the same guy. And here's a complex. Here's a composite description. Black male, 30 years old, 5 foot. You can't say black male anymore. You can say male. Well, then how are you supposed to narrow it down? What are you supposed to look for? White guys? Hispanic guys? Asian guys? Arab guys? It's an extremely important marker in criminal investigation. So Biden, by the other way, after he releases this executive order, and that was just like last week, I was going to get into it. Before I sat down in front of this microphone, I'm going through my news feeds one more time. He rescinded the order today. Biden. He's backtracking now and saying, oh, no, we didn't mean that. They can use that. You know why he said that? Because if Biden's going to prohibit federal agency from using race as a marker, that means he can't do it. And guess what? He does it all the time. Remember when he picked his vice president? He said, I'm going to pick a black female. He used race as a marker in deciding who his vice president would be. You know what he said when he filled the United States Supreme Court? See, with the Ketanji Brown, whatever her name is. Remember what he said? I'm going to choose a black female. He uses race all of the time. The left always uses race in their insidious game of identity politics. That's why he rescinded it, because he does it. And then he couldn't do it anymore. I was reading a story here on the Biden and the police order on the second anniversary of George Floyd's death. And he says here, it's a measure of what we can do together to heal the very soul of this nation, to address the profound fear, trauma, exhaustion, which is all a bunch of lies, particularly Black Americans have experienced for generations. So he just did it. That's why he rescinded this. Someone probably said, hey, Joe, then you can't talk about race anymore in your insidious game of identity politics. You can't do it. And they said, well, this is a key part of what we try to do and we like to do. Let's turn the page again. Actually, we have to turn the page backwards for this one. You remember my last podcast, I talked about the Durham investigation, their conclusion. It was, nearly 400-page bunch of nothing, a big fat nothing burger, as they like to say. Where he points out, they used a faulty affidavit to apply for a search warrant to spy on a Trump campaign, and paid for a dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign, Hillary Clinton campaign, and stuff we already knew. If you're tuning in for the first time or you missed last week, go back and listen, because I'm not going to drag you all through a whole rendition of what Durham's report was. But guess what? Breaking news. This is from the Washington Times. Headline, Senators question why Durham didn't interview top officials at DOJ and FBI about Trump-Russia probe. I read this and I said, you've got to be kidding me. This whole damn thing, this Durham investigation, and I was tweeting all throughout this last 3 years of this investigation. We want indictments. Stop with the saber rattling. Stop with the theater. Stop with the drama. We want indictments. And we didn't get them. And now the U.S. Senate finds out Durham didn't talk to any of the key figures. He didn't talk to Comey. He didn't talk to Peter Strzok. He didn't talk to McCabe. He didn't talk to Lisa Page. He didn't talk to Christopher Steele. What kind of shoddy investigation did he do? Like I said, I'm a trained, experienced investigator. You have to talk to everybody. Durham never talked to top officials at the DOJ and the FBI who were all up in this thing with this corruption and these illegal wiretaps and lying under oath. Why wouldn't Durham talk to these people? I mean, remember, Bill Barr appointed this guy as a special investigator, whatever title he was using. And Barr said he picked him because he's an experienced, lawyer, a government lawyer. These people, first of all, if there's anything government lawyers are experienced at, it's incompetency. That's why they work for the government. If you are a top flight attorney, you're trying to hook on with a big, noted law firm. You're not looking for a career. You graduate from law school, you know who gets plucked off the top of these graduating law school classes? Big law firms pick off the cream of the crop. Hey, come with us. You know, the big DC law firms, the big private law firms, they pick the cream of the crop. The rest of these people that just barely made it through, you end up becoming government lawyers. So let me read a little bit from this article here, Washington Times. Special counsel John Durham's final report did not include interviews with top Justice Department officials who were deeply involved in launching the Trump-Russia collusion investigation. And 2 senators want to know why. Guess who else wants to know why? We, the American people. We, the MAGA movement, who had to endure our guy, President Trump, under siege for his entire 4 years as president. We want to know why. So it says here, Senators Ron Johnson and Charles Grassley wrote to Durham asking him to explain why his report is missing testimony from former FBI Director James Comey, FBI Assistant Director Andrew McCabe, and others who played a key role in the flawed Crossfire hurricane investigation of the 2016 Trump campaign. It says here, it seems odd that individuals will be allowed to fully avoid cooperating with your office, particularly given your authority to compel testimony and records. The Republican senators wrote to Mr. Durham, who spent 4 years investigating pursuit of Trump. It was, what did I say? What did I say? This stuff is all theater. And I said that in last week's podcast about this Hunter Biden laptop and his dealings, corrupt dealings, and Joe Biden being involved. I said it's never going to see the light of day. Don't kid yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Don't do this to yourself. Don't punish yourself and thinking these people will be held accountable, because they're not going to be held accountable. There's a different standard for the super elite and the well-connected than there is for the common person. Hillary Clinton. Durham should have interviewed Hillary Clinton, for heaven's sake. The money, the Steele dossier was paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. He should have. She's a major player in this thing. Again, as a trained expert investigator that I was, you have to interview everybody. If their name comes up, even if they have nothing to say, you bring them in, you go, I wasn't even in the country during that period of time. Okay, you got to get a statement from them. I'll tell you what I think Durham was doing, because all his report was like I said, a compilation of New York Times, Washington Post, New York Post, CNN, and they did have some testimony before Congress when the Republicans were still in control of Congress. That's all he did was just recite what they said and what we already knew. So now he had a chance here to go further and drag these people in, put them under oath, catch them lying, because they would be lying, because we already know what they did. Come on now, I know how to interrogate. I know how to interview. I already know what you did. So don't tell me that you didn't do it. You can claim the fifth. And then put these people before a grand jury. He had a grand jury convened. Get him in there. Under oath in front of a grand jury. And make them claim the fifth, because that's what they'd have to do. There's no way these people know. They know this. You can't lie under, although they knew they couldn't lie under oath when they went in to get the FISA court to get the wiretap authorization. They knew they can't lie under oath, but they did anyway. So, this whole dog and pony show, by Durham. It says here in the story, Mr. Comey and Miss McCabe played central roles in launching Crossfire Hurricane, but declined to be interviewed by Mr. Durham. Then he should have subpoenaed them. And he should have hauled them in front of a grand jury and questioned them. But see, Durham knows, I want to be part of this elite. I don't want to be kicked out of the club. I don't want to end up like Kenneth Starr, who found out that there was a blue stained dress. Remember that? And holy hell was rained down on Kenneth Starr by the DC elite and the connected powers because they caught Bill Clinton. See, Durham didn't want any of that. Durham, he just kind of didn't want to, he knew that calling those people in under oath and getting them in front of a grand jury to question him, he knew he'd be flying a little too close to the sun. That's why he didn't do it. This whole Durham thing. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people on the right, including President Trump. Oh, see, look at this. They didn't find nothing. We already knew that stuff. So we'll see, because, that's another thing about these stories. They're one-day stories. You might get some, squeeze some more juice and get a week coverage out of it on TV, and then it's just gone. It's gone. I want to know now from Senators Ron Johnson and Grassley how Durham responds. Matter of fact, what they should do, they should call him in before their committee. These guys are the chairs. No, they're not. The Dems still control the Senate. I'm thinking of the House. Call him in before the committee in public with the television cameras rolling and ask Durham, how come you didn't talk to the principals? And make Durham say they refused to come in. Why didn't you give him a subpoena to a grand jury? And see what Durham has to say. All this stuff just makes me sick. It really does. And I get tired of it. And I want to know, ladies and gentlemen, remember I challenged you at the end of last week's podcast. I want to know when you're going to be tired of it. I need to know that. Because these people know they can get away with this crap because they know the American people have just gone soft. We express a little outrage. They can't do that. Something's got to be done. There ought to be a law. We need a new law. No, we don't. The only hope for this republic at this point is to downgrade the place of Washington, D.C. in our public lives. Downgrade it. Ignore them. Work through the states. So, in the last chapter here, it's not often that a sitting Supreme Court justice, outside of, issuing an opinion, writing an opinion, they don't reveal too much about how they really feel about what's going on. But Supreme Court Justice, Associate Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, Neil Gorsuch, was very candid not too long ago when he's talking about the pandemic. And he hit the nail right on the head. I'm going to read this thing. It's not that long because these are Gorsuch's words interspersed with some other comments here. And I don't want him taken out of context. Again, this is from the Washington Times. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch issued a searing denunciation on the way the country handled the corona pandemic in a statement Thursday. See, remember I said It's not often that Supreme Court justices just make statements for no reason. But he made a statement Thursday warning that Americans were all too eager to give up their freedoms on the say-so of a few chief executives. He's basically talking about Fauci, Biden, and governors. He chided legislatures and judges for vacating the field and leaving the president and governors unobstructed as they issued decrees. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not a republic. We allow these people to act like dictators. And we all say, oh, yeah. You know, this phrase, out of an abundance of caution. Well, people might die. 2.5 million people die every year of all other causes. What do you mean people might die? When have they not died? Back to the article here. Those decrees cut deep into Americans' most fundamental freedoms, canceling schools, shuttering shops and closing churches, casinos, and other favored businesses, which were allowed to roll on. Ladies and gentlemen, let me stop here for a second. What I like to be is a voice of dissent. You tune into this podcast, not for me to just parrot what everybody else is saying and use talking points and just repeat what, the prevailing narrative is. I offer dissent. Why? I get criticized for it a lot. You know me, I don't give a damn what people criticize me for. I do so because dissent is healthy in a democracy, challenging prevailing orthodoxies, challenging narratives, challenging what people are passing off as the truth when it's a lie. So back to the story here. Justice Gorsuch also said it took place while dissenting voices were silenced by social media companies responding to government pressure. This was an ugly chapter in American history, ladies and gentlemen. This pandemic. First of all, it wasn't a pandemic. It wasn't. Now the truth's coming out. And now even Fauci's saying, well, yeah, the masks, they don't really work. We had Joe Biden and governors forcing us against our will to wear a piece of cloth over our face and to stand 6 feet away from other people. And we couldn't have funerals and give our loved ones a proper burial. Weddings had to be canceled. Think of this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, that we were more than eager to, go along with. Well, out of an abundance of caution. We were cowards. Some people did dissent. Some people did stand up. They were arrested and they were cut off of social. A doctor with an opposing viewpoint on this, doctors, medical people, scientists with an opposing view were shut down. And that's why you are not going to convince me that we're still a republic. We are no longer a republic. I don't know what we are, but we're not a republic. Back to the story here. It all made for a worrying study of democracy. Here's a quote from Gorsuch. One lesson might be this: fear and the desire for safety are powerful forces. They can lead to a clamor for action, almost any action, as long as someone does something to address a perceived threat, Gorsuch wrote. We may even cheer on those who ask us to disregard our normal lawmaking process and forfeit our personal freedoms. That out of an abundance of caution. And then you had that goofy governor of New York, Cuomo. Remember him? He got an Emmy for his news conferences on the pandemic. See, we were cheering them on. Yeah, you go. Man, that's real leadership there. Boy, he's demonstrating leadership. No, they weren't. They were showing you what a dictatorship looks like, what totalitarianism looks like. That's what they were doing. And we just, we don't want to die. Well, you don't put the mask on, you kids are going to die. And then the forced vaccinations, forcing us to inject something into our body. We didn't know what it was. It was rushed to market. And yeah, Trump had his hands in this too. He was trying to save his re-election, his presidency. That was his motivation. Doesn't make it right. And he turned it over to Fauci, an unelected bureaucrat, who's now saying, well, yeah, the masks don't really work. Who initially said, when the thing first broke, this coronavirus, on 60 Minutes, he said there's no need for people to rush out and buy masks and put them on. He says, just wash your hands. He said that on 60 Minutes in the early days of the pandemic. No need to do that. But then he did a 180. Oh, yeah, wear the mask will stop the spread. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, this was supposed to flatten the curve. They said 2 weeks of doing this. Close your businesses, essential, non-essential, 2 weeks. So hospitals would become inundated, which they never were. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, ladies and gentlemen, ended up being 2 years of this totalitarianism. Mask wearing, mask mandates, forced vaccinations, people losing their jobs, military people discharged for not taking the jab. We all just stood by. And we want, well, just take the jab. Just get the vaccination. Remember, they first said about the vaccine, you get the vaccination, you won't get COVID. That turned out to be a lie. The whole damn thing was based on lies, on top of lies. So it says here, Gorsuch's statement came as part of a complicated case involving whether a state could intervene to defend federal executive action when the new administration no longer wanted to. A lower court had ruled against Arizona's attempt to do so, but the high court on Thursday erased the ruling, saying the entire issue was moot now that the pandemic emergency lapsed last week. So this is what made Gorsuch, he opined anyway. I can't believe how easily you people laid your rights down. Turn them back over to bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats. Remember another famous buzz phrase during that period of time? Follow the science. There was nothing scientific about this crap. And then we let Pfizer hide all of their research and whatever, including the, what do you call that? The side effects for 75 years. Most of us will be dead. And they won't be writing about this in the history books. This was amazing. Simply amazing. They did it once and they'll do it again over what amounted to the flu virus. And I remember at the time, I put out a tweet when these orders started coming down to flatten the curve. We're going to shut everything down. And I put out a tweet, take to the streets. And ladies and gentlemen, I was chided. I was ridiculed by noted conservatives, calling that reckless. You're going to cause people to die. And that's when I reminded them. I went and did some research and found out 2.5 million people die every year. Every year, 2.5 million. By the way, now that they're looking back, they didn't see any real spike in deaths during the pandemic years. It was still around 2.5 million for those years. Little spike one year, I think it was 2.8. But yet we were told millions. They're still stuck in that number, that over 2 million people died of COVID. It's a lie. No, they didn't. This is what we're up against. Again, when are you going to express more than just outrage? When are you going to take to the streets? When are you going to push back? Look what they did in, when was it, Sri Lanka? Look what they did in France. Several million people showed up to push back against the government when they were trying to change their Social Security. And I'm not going to get into the efficacy of should they change the Social Security. 2 million people showed up in the streets, not in blogs, not on talk radio, not in think tanks, in the streets. That's powerful. I think Sri Lanka had 250,000 people showed up when they were questioning election results. 250,000. And circled the presidential palace. They had to airlift president out of there. That's how you protest. That's how you get it done. And all of these things going on in this country right now that we don't like. And what are we doing? We're sitting around waiting for the next election. Well, the next election, we should get a Republican in there and they'll probably win the Senate. Nothing's going to change. Nothing is going to change until you and me and we the people force these people in Washington, D.C. to change. Yes, I said force. Keep that in mind. They're not going to do it willingly. Be well. Friends, I want to thank you for listening to today's episode of Straight Talk with yours truly, America's Sheriff David Clarke. And a special thank you also goes out to our sponsors. My goal, as always, is to break down these complex and many times controversial issues and bring it to you straight with a little dose of common sense, no media bias, no talking points, just truth. And this podcast would not be possible without your support. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite place to listen. And please share this message of common sense on social media. For more content, be sure to follow me on Truth Social, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And just a reminder, we'd love for you to join our Straight Shooters VIP podcast club for only $5 per month. And with that membership, you'll receive invitations to attend private podcast events throughout the year as a VIP guest when we come to your town. Plus, if you join today, you'll also receive a free coffee mug and a sample of our private label coffee as long as supplies last. Subscribe and join at americasheriff.com. This podcast is brought to you by americasheriff.com with executive producer Judy Wilkinson of J.L. Wilkinson Consulting and producer Josh Wentz in partnership with our friends at Bulldog Media. If you are interested in partnering with Straight Talk Podcasts or having me speak in your area, please contact Judy at jlwilkinsonconsulting@gmail.com, 706-518-2116. That's jlwilkinsonconsulting@gmail.com. Phone number 706-518-2116.